Welcome to Terror in Tandem, a podcast about finding entertainment in the macabre, hosted by the knowledgeable and lovable Laura and Richard Mathiasen. Each episode, we discuss the horror genre, from books to film to TV and beyond, sometimes even from the beyond. You can find us online at terrorintandem.com and on Instagram at terrorintandem.
And you really should check out the Instagram. It's amazing.
I have to say that, our social media person has taken a little bit of a break over the summer.
Which is fine. It's fine. She's unpaid.
The postings are going to be a little less frequent. But
just
other
check
than
it
that,
out.
Yeah.
It is amazing. I think it's awesome. I really love it. I follow it on my Finsta.
Yeah, I know. Big old dummy 49.
49?
That's what your handle is.
That's
I don't
year
understand.
I was born. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Secret boomer.
That's how many complaints you have in a day.
At least.
So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about summer.
You know, it's been weird because it's the weather's been cold.
But also hot.
Interesting.
We'll have like a crazy hot day.
Yeah.
And then it'll be cold for a week.
I know. But in the 40s,
yeah.
it's
been
like
weird. But it'll be in the 90s and you'll get your air conditioning in, and then the next week you won't use it at all because it's freezing.
For those of you that live in apartments, not us, obviously.
Or luxury properties, many of them. Some of them may be condos.
Some of them are smaller. They're in like the 10,000 square foot range, really tiny. But for those of you who do live in apartments, you know what it's like. You can't put your winter stuff away until really late, but you also need your spring stuff out because some days it's hot and it's just like clothing everywhere.
And how many people keep like one or two sweaters or sweatshirts held back from their changeover just because of those fictitious cold summer nights?
All right, so listen, I do because I get
He's
really
cold all the time.
I do. I'm like a
cold
little
of
chihuahua.
Heart and cold of...
No, warm heart, cold hands. That's the expression.
Yeah, but...
Dead heart, cold hands, risen from the grave.
Cold stone...
They put me where the earth was sour.
Cold to the bone.
And I came back wrong.
I can't believe you didn't even acknowledge that.
Did you say
one.
Cold to the bone?
I said cold stone, cold to the bone.
Nice.
So Stone,
creamery.
What are we going to talk about?
Well,
right.
You know what?
You're going to have to cut that.
I don't think so.
If you want to.
I love it. So I thought. Since it's ostensibly summer and we just did our dope
summer camp
survival kit, which if you've been following, congrats on staying alive. And if you didn't, my condolences to your family.
Happy to hear from our audience, though. Why don't you comment on the summer camp survival post on Instagram?
Did you survive a potential
give us some ideas that you might have that we've
awesome.
Missed.
A little engagement. If you survived a massacre thanks to one of our survival kit tips, let us know. I survived. You'll get an I survived Cropsy pin. You won't, but now I want to make that. So, anyway, following up on that, I thought, let's do another remake, and let's do...
You did.
Friday the 13th.
You thought it all up on your own.
We thought,
I keep forgetting that this is not a team effort.
So, we thought, why not follow it up with one of our favorite things to do, which is remake, and...
Remake is in quotes for this one.
Well, it is. Yeah. And we did Friday the 13th. So we're talking the 1980 original, directed by Sean S. Cunningham, and the 2009 remake directed by Marcus Nispel.
Make requel.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a bunch of things. It's a remake. It's a reboot. It's like a...
Reimagining?
Yeah, it's something that you see a lot more nowadays, but this was one of the earlier versions of it. And it's actually directed by the same guy that did the pretty decent 2006 reboot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
It doesn't actually even maybe qualify as a remake because it does pick up at the end of where the first
It does
1980
a similar
version left off, but it's not a sequel.
No, it does a similar thing to what the recent Halloween movies did, in that it sort of retcons the original a little bit and then builds on it in a way that is effective, in my opinion. But
it's sort of, we were thinking that requel has been sort of a contemporary term.
Yeah.
But I think that this is probably one of the first instances of a requel.
You know, with this much content, there are always evolutions in storytelling, and it's interesting to see how old stories get repackaged. But let's do this in order. Let's start with the original.
Yeah, well, I want to start before that. I want to start a little bit about some of the hysteria in the 20th century about the actual Friday the 13th date.
Would love it.
So,
that's the thing. Yeah, why? Why Friday the 13th? Why do people freak out about it? Even non-superstitious modern people, like anybody who's ever worked in an office, always has somebody being like, oh, Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
I
remember.
Or if you've ever worked with me, it's coming in with a bunch of Jason stuff. And
I remember when I was growing up, every Friday the 13th, everybody said that you needed to wear old shoes.
What? I never heard that before.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know.
You were never informed of the consequences of wearing new shoes?
I mean,
do you think it was just a way your parents justified buying you like ratty old shoes?
It wasn't from the parents.
No?
It was sort of like
the old cobbler.
The community.
The community cobbler?
They put up one of those signs that said, don't forget your old shoes this Friday the 13th. They didn't do that.
Oh my God.
I know, they didn't.
I wish they did.
I know.
That would be so cool.
I know.
Waterford?
I wish my town was similar to like a Hawkins or something.
Do you? I mean, that's the thing that gets me about all of those teen shows is, you know, that's a lot of dead teenagers over like the course of a few seasons.
We're going to talk about
I'm just saying, like in Stranger Things, like, why is anyone still sending their kids to that school?
So back to Friday the 13th, the hysteria started in the 20th century.
Okay, so relatively new.
There's been a lot of theories of why, and they've all been debunked. And sort of the one that I found that wasn't quite debunked.
Was it rebunked?
Is Thomas Lawson's book, Friday the 13th, which is about a stockbroker who chooses this day to deliberately crash the stock market.
Oh.
And 1 year later, in 1908, the New York Times became one of the first media outlets to acknowledge the superstitions of the date. Well, then in the 80s, the popularity of Friday the 13th, which we're going to talk about, added to the cultural phenomenon.
I mean, 13, I think, has been an unlucky number for a lot longer than just the 20th century.
So let's jump into the 1980 version of Friday the 13th.
All right. Directed by best friends Sean S. Cunningham and written by Victor Miller. Two guys that have never had an argument with each other and remain close to just kidding. They've been engaged in a years-long legal battle over rights to this film, but we'll get into that a bit later.
Do you want me to run through quickly the plot?
Do I?
Yeah.
I do. I really do.
So, two counselors at Camp Crystal Lake are murdered in 1958, and then the camp is closed. A lot of attempts had been made to reopen, and they were thwarted because of arson and contaminated water. We learned that from one of the locals that drives this girl basically to her death.
Yes.
And then in 1979, another attempt was made and successfully opening, where counselors were hired to work there and then are killed off one by one.
The interesting thing about this movie is it all takes place like in the days before the camp officially opens.
Yes. And honestly, those kids show up ready to work.
For sure. Oh, yeah.
They're very serious. And that's one of the distinctions I'll talk about with the later one. These aren't teenagers that are there to party and like hook up and get drunk. So not that they don't hook up and drink, but they're there to work and open this camp and get paid.
Very specific reason for that, and I'm going to get into it in a little bit.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right. There's a really different flavor with the original Friday the 13th, and I would say the second one as well, as opposed to like the 6th, 7th, 8th installments of it. Not just in terms of plot and content, but in like vibe, attitude, and direction. It's really, really a shocking change.
This Jason is played by Ari Lehman.
Mm-hmm.
There's sort of famous cast members, and some of the cast members, actually, this is where their career started.
Sort of famous?
Well, Betsy Palmer.
Oh, yeah, of course. She had already been
she
pretty
was
well
a
established.
TV panelist on
Oh, yeah.
I Got a Secret from 1957 to 67, and on Knots Landing from 1989 to 1990.
Yeah, it was a fascinating casting choice because she was a TV veteran, a stalwart actor, and then this was quite a departure, especially so late in her career. And I got to say, one of my favorite things about the original movie is Pamela Voorhees.
Yeah.
She is played by Betsy Palmer just so maniacally. It's wonderful.
Well, and it's almost, a woman on the break, on a psychotic break.
Oh, yeah. No, there are, you can see elements of her character in other, like, later portrayals, like in, earlier. Like, there's an element of, Mrs. Bates. There's an element of Mrs. White from Carrie. Mm-hmm. And the sort of classic trope of the super religious, over mommying, clingy type who just goes bananas crazy.
Well, Carrie came after this movie because Brian De Palma famously said that he stole that reaching the hand from the grave from this
shit,
movie.
You're right. Nice.
Yeah.
Very good.
So,
Stand
basically
corrected.
what happens is we have these groups of kids, teenagers, coming to the camp. One is, and honestly, I don't really understand the movement of the plot and why this is anything of note, but I guess for her to encounter the townspeople is the backpacking girl who doesn't have anything to do with the rest of the group in the movie, but it seems like it was the only reason was to have that truck driver drop her off miles away. She's supposed to be the cook.
Yeah.
And he tells her that a boy drowned in 1957.
Yeah, it's an exposition dump.
Because of the lack of counselor accountability because they were hooking up.
It was fucking... So the thing about the original Friday the 13th is I call it the Reservoir Dogs of horror movies because it is simultaneously a movie I really, really enjoy, and it's a good movie. But it is a blatant ripoff of several movies that came before it. The kills are lifted almost completely from Mario Bava's Bay of Blood. The slasher elements from Black Christmas. The music by Harry Manfredi could almost be a doppelganger for Bernard Herrmann.
Exactly
like Psycho.
It's
heavily influenced by
the violins, screaming,
exactly.
The strings, screaming strings, it's called.
When you were watching it in the other room and I heard it, I immediately thought Bernard Herrmann.
Yeah.
It's a movie that quite shamelessly, quote unquote, borrows from other films in the way that Reservoir Dogs is basically an unofficial remake of City on Fire.
Well, maybe if we think of it this way, that he took all of these influences and remade them into this teen indulgent slasher film.
Sure, but if you've ever seen Mario Bava's movie Bay of Blood, you'll notice these aren't homages necessarily. They are straight up ripoffs.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I'm just pointing that out because the movie is still good. It works. It's a classic for a reason. I've seen it a dozen times or more. It's awesome. But it does owe a lot to the masters that came
Absolutely. Can I give some quick facts about this film?
You can give slow facts.
It was filmed at Camp Nobi Bosco in New Jersey.
Anybody die at that one?
No, it's still in operation.
Hey!
It's been used a lot by the Boy Scouts of America.
Well.
Harry Manfredi.
Mm-hmm.
He came up with the key, ma, ma, ma.
Which still blows my mind.
People do say ch. Yeah, but it's
I know. And if you read the script, that is what it says in the script. Ki, ma, ma, ma. It's crazy.
During filming.
It's like the Michael Jackson song, Mama Say, Mama Sa, Mama.
Yeah.
Like, what is he really saying? Everybody has a different answer.
I'm gonna say something. I'm not gonna stop. That's what he says.
I thought it was Mama Say, Mama Sa, Mama Mambusa.
It might be Mama Say,
Mama
like how, Sa, I'm not gonna stop.
How like Anthony Kiedis would every once in a while just forget the lyrics or something.
It's
and just
not
be like, Mama Say, Baba Da, Ba Da.
It's not Mamakusa.
I know, but it could be. Mama Say, Mama Sa, Mama Mambusa.
So while filming at the camp, they had a very famous rock star as a neighbor.
Was it Michael Jackson?
Lou Reed.
Oh, that's cool.
He came to the set and hung out and played tunes for them.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Can you fucking imagine being that young in 1979 and
not even knowing the like impact of it, really?
No, you do. I mean, Lou Reed at that point, he had been out of the Velvet Underground for a while. He had a booming, solo career. Oh man, that is so cool.
Kevin Bacon.
Cool.
Obviously, this is the first of his debut films.
It's well, did Animal House come before?
But he's like a major player in this, and
Animal House. He has a tiny part,
well.
but he's and
he's a main character in this film.
And he's got one of the better dispatches.
Bill, the character of Bill, is played by Harry Crosby, who's the son of Bing Crosby.
Yeah.
This is the same year.
Red Christmas.
1980 is the same year that The Shining, The Fog, and Prom Night came out.
Damn.
Good year for horror.
You know what else came out in 1980? This guy.
Yeah, you sure did.
Came right out.
Jason is not mentioned by name until nearly the end of the film by his mother.
Mm-hmm.
The film takes place on July 4th, 1958, at the beginning of the film.
Yes.
And then on June 13th, which is a Friday, present day, no year is mentioned, so we're just naturally going to assume it's 1980.
Yeah, so like maybe this term Friday the 13th had been bandied around a little bit, but it's the movie series that really solidified it in the public consciousness.
Jason only appears in the film via flashbacks except for the end scene.
Which is
one of the best endings.
Yes. What did you say? You said that to
film.
me the other day.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. It's
very
phenomenal.
Unexpected. And then you'll see.
And Adrienne King is great throughout the whole movie. She's got an amazing 70s haircut.
Yeah.
But also at the end, she really does.
The whole visual aspect of it. You need to watch just the ending, the view on the lake, the reflective of how it looks like it's that Michelangelo hand to God painting.
The birth of
She's
Adam.
like touching the water. Her fingers are just in the water, and it looks like she's reaching into another hand, but it's the reflection of her hand. And just the way that everything is set up and how placid the lake is.
It's very similar to the ending, this did come later, the ending of A Nightmare on Elm Street, where it's shot almost like it's a dream.
Yeah.
And then, is it? Because she wakes up in the hospital screaming about, a boy, blah, blah, blah. And they tell her there's nobody. Now.
I'm not done. It's said to be, this film has said to have been inspired by the real-life Lake Bodom murders, which took place in Espoo, Finland in the 60s.
There is actually a Finnish film called Lake Bodom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I want to say, which is, sort of in line with what we were talking about, this same year, all of these great horror movies came out.
All of these great podcast co-hosts.
And there are really many unknowns in this film.
Yes.
The film grossed 10 times the production cost
Oh, yeah.
opening weekend.
Oh, that's why there are a billion of them.
Yes, so it was hugely successful. Everybody was looking for this film. I think it made $39.7 million.
In 1980, which
Yeah.
is like $1 billion now.
So what
Math.
else do you have to say about it?
I want to talk a little bit about, so about a year or two ago, I've seen all of these movies, but I've never sat down and watched them sequentially one after the other. So I spent a couple of weeks watching every single one from start to finish. And I noticed that the series Friday the 13th, because it begins in 1980 and it runs through 2009, it's a fantastic mirror to the changing cultural landscape of America. So you mentioned in 1980 that the depiction of these teenagers is, yeah, they party, they smoke weed, they fuck, but they also work and they are capable. They're not caricatures.
And only the couples hook up. It's
Yes.
not as if they're sort of like constantly.
No, it's not like
it's mostly them working, and the dialogue is very sparse.
It's very, yes, and it's believable.
because they're working.
Mm-hmm. So, also in the original, the cops, basically useless, which is probably a little closer to life. Now, the thing is, as the movies progress through the 80s, you get into the Reagan years, and something changes. A few things change, actually. So, as you mentioned, Jason only appears at the end of the first film as a like a deformed child jumping out of a lake.
Allegedly.
Yeah. So by the middle of the series, he's really the protagonist. And a couple of things happen. Jason, first off, the body count stays about the same, but the gore level goes way down. Now, Jason...
That was a direct reflection of the studios.
Yes.
After the first one, the studio said, you need to cut a lot of this violence out. It needs to be more implied than it does actually shown.
And this mirrors the rightward shift of the United States in the 1980s during the Reagan years. Now, the gore level goes way down, and another thing happens is Jason stops targeting middle-class white kids, and he starts targeting, quote-unquote, undesirables. So what you'll notice in the later entries is Jason kills a lot of minorities, a lot of drifters, a lot of drug users, mentally challenged, and the obese.
The later versions don't seem to be so much of a revenge against camp counselors who let him drown and killed his mother. It seems more like a crazy psychopath and I'm out to hunt and murder people.
Now, another part of that is if you make Jason the protagonist of the film, you've got to give the audience a way to ameliorate the guilt that they may feel for rooting for a psycho monster who should be the villain of the movie. Now, if you have a certain worldview, like imagine your worst uncle that you tried not to sit next to at Thanksgiving, you are cheering at Jason because Jason is taking out all the things that make you angry, like hooligans and drug addicts and minorities. That is really what happens. But as with all things, the pendulum swings back. And by the 90s, oh man, the excess is back. You get the gore back. I mean, you've got entries where Jason gets killed by the army and becomes a hell slug that possesses people. He goes to space and fights David Cronenberg and an android. He fights Freddy Krueger. It's balls to the wall at that point because America started to shift in the 90s. You started to the censorship started to lighten up a little bit, and there became the era of like extreme, where the goal was to go as far as possible. And you saw it all over pop culture, like comic books, very famously, everybody was really muscular and disproportionate, and it was hypersexualized. That's where you get things like the X Games and stuff like that. So it really, really does mirror
the
just
changing of times.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to watch. it cycle around. Because man, to every season, turn. But it is a bummer when you get into the later entries and you're like, is Jason just targeting the people that my uncle doesn't like? It's weird. It really is. And it's a nice return to form when he starts being a villain again.
Well, does he though? Because when we get to the 1990s, I'm going to argue that he's not quite a villain. He is a victim. And he's trying to, keep his situation isolated.
Certainly in the remake.
Imposing.
In the remake, for sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. When we talk about that, absolutely.
So one of the things that I found really compelling about the 1980 version was the point of view shots from the killer's perspective.
Lifted.
We never knew who that killer was until the very, very end.
Another element lifted almost directly from the film Peeping Tom.
Yeah. Or
Maniac.
It was pretty straightforward. And you also, the use of shadows in the film, especially like seeing the weapon, the axe being raised. And then, Mrs. Voorhees' shadow before she actually confronts Alice. You don't know who this is. You don't know. If you go back and watch it now as a contemporary adult,
for sure,
you think it's Jason, but it's not. It's his mother. And
Drew Barrymore didn't know, and it cost her life.
I know.
In Scream.
Yeah.
But it's Sean S. Cunningham on a shoestring budget, an unproven director, really nailed it. I know I've said a lot that it's borrows, to be generous, from other films, but that's not to say it's not a good movie. It is. It's well directed. It's well acted. The screenplay pops. The kills are inventive and cool. And the twist at the end works.
Yeah, I mean it's very raw.
Yeah.
And it's really not even about the fear factor, because I didn't find it particularly scary except the ending. What it really is anyone gonna make it?
Yeah.
It's more like
and then there were none kind
last?
of. Yeah.
Who's gonna make it?
And the brutality of the kills too. I mean, this old lady's
like
shooting people with fucking spear guns and
it's like 1980s just rusty tools.
It's
use what you have.
There's a Texas Chainsaw vibe to it too, because it's a sweaty, grimy film.
One of the other things I wanted to mention that I really liked about the 1980 version is how nobody else has any idea that these people are being brutalized.
Oh, yeah, they're in the middle of nowhere.
But also they're like busy working and doing other things. That cook that never showed up. They don't know that she was just like brutally murdered.
Yeah, on her way.
Yeah. And somebody is like going to hook up and they're both killed. But
that these deaths
their
are
person
happening
above in the bunk bed above is dead. They have no idea.
Yeah.
They're hooking up below. And it's sort of, we have the point of view of the killer, first of all. And second of all, we know who's dead, but all of the other characters don't know.
That's where a lot of the tension in the original comes, is the dramatic irony, is the knowledge the audience has of like, oh my God, 3 feet from you is a dead body, pinned to a wall.
Yeah.
Also, got to give it to Betsy Palmer. Did she take like water aerobics or something? Because she is butchering these teenagers and like displaying their bodies.
Yeah.
It's
like that mother who is trying to save their child.
Oh yeah,
strength.
Got the mom strength. But it did remind me a little bit of like later on urban legend when you find out that Rebecca Gayheart, the Noxzema girl, is the killer, and you're like, wait, hold on, she's like 110 pounds. She was lifting bodies into the air and football players. That's a bad movie. The 1980 version of Friday the 13th, I can't recommend enough.
The music is very sparse, and again, it does sound very much like Psycho,
but it doesn't even have the hallmarks. There's no hockey mask, there's no hulking Terminator Jason monster.
I think it's a little sluggish in the middle, but that that's just the nature of movie making, especially when the plot is barely there. But these teens are all pretty likable. Nobody is annoying. Even the one friend that is a little like obnoxious.
Yeah, there's no
funny.
Shelley from Jason 3.
And I think for the most part, you feel for these kids, and it really does create Pamela Voorhees as a very unlikable villain.
Oh, she's a monster.
And
like also, like, even if she wasn't a killer, you definitely would hate this woman.
The decapitation at the end of Alice decapitating Pamela Voorhees was really, really, really well done.
And Adrienne King does a great job playing just a regular girl having to do terrible things to survive. She's not a special forces
she's like a doe.
And she cuts her
in the woods.
fucking head off.
Yeah.
And that deeply affects her.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
it really does.
good.
Very, very unlikely final girl.
I can't recommend the original enough. It's a lot of fun. It's one you can keep coming back to. It kicked off a juggernaut of a legacy.
Yeah, like, listen, not all of it holds up. Now that we have more perspective of how, certain adults treat
for sure
women and kids.
There's sexism all over the place in this movie.
It's not offensive.
No.
And it is what it is. And honestly, I think that ending, again, I'm going to say one of the best endings.
Well, there's no indication that is the direction or message the film or the filmmakers are trying. It's just characterization. You've got one guy who is a dick to women.
And
that's realistic.
And he drives her to her death.
He certainly does.
He's like, you shouldn't go, but he's still driving her. The only person that's really trying hard is the local, weirdo, I guess.
Yeah.
The oddball who shows up at the camp and jumps out of the closet.
Audience, we can't say this enough.
Listen to the
locals.
Crazy person.
I know their delivery's not great. I know they come off a little strong. Maybe they're covered in grease or dirt, or they're got like trinkets all over the place made out of rabbit heads, but they've been through some shit. That's why they're that way. They've been trying to warn you dumb fucks for decades. Just listen. Look past.
You want to take a break and talk about the
2009
requel remake?
Let's do it.
Trash bag.
All right. Sure, spearing 3 people at once with a harpoon gun is satisfying. But if it jams, who's going to make those camp counselors pay for having disco parties while you drowned in a lake? No, the real immortal death machine knows there's just no beating a bladed weapon. But how can you set yourself apart from every other Dick and Jane out there with a fridge full of severed heads? You're mommy's special monster, and you deserve a weapon as twisted as your soul. Well, introducing Uncle Jason's Knives and Blades, a one-stop emporium for your stabby satisfaction. Every weapon at Uncle Jason's is handmade in a custom workshop out of an abandoned shipping container. No design is too outlandish for Uncle Jason. Just bring us your blood-soaked dream journal, and we'll customize your weapon to your exact specification. Wondering how to clean all the chunks of small-town deputy off your new toy? Just bring it in for a special hose down, and we'll clear out all the brains, sinew, even poop, at no extra cost. If you're in the game, you know where to find us. And if not, don't worry. I promise we'll find you. So come on down to Uncle Jason's Knives and Blades. Take out all the rage you feel towards your dead mother in style on the next hitchhiker unlucky enough to eat a banana in front of you. This is a fake ad for a fake product on a horror-themed podcast. We do not condone nor endorse killing people with fancy custom weapons you made in a shed.
It's a cranberry watermelon spritzer.
Delicious. And we're back.
Oh, hello.
Hi. So that's the original.
Yeah, so 2009's Friday the 13th.
Can we both agree, though, that we both really like the original?
Yes, I think we did agree.
Oh.
I said it had the best ending.
I like to re-agree.
Yeah.
Re-agree.
Nobody's going to win Oscars.
No, but it is a good time.
So yeah, the 2009 Friday the 13th, the 13th.
Oh, wow, Freudian slip.
I know.
Yeah. Okay. So listen.
Friday the turd.
I want to get this out of the way. I saw this in the theater when it came out. I was 29 years old. I really, really liked it. And I was really excited to watch it again because I don't think I've seen it since then. I had a very different experience watching it this time.
And it was my first
time. As someone who is not 29 anymore.
It was my first time.
It was beloved co-host Laura's first time. Now, the things I remember really liking about the movie, I still really like about this movie, and I'll talk about them, but if I were rating this film, my rating would go down.
Yeah, it is gratuitous, sex, like really boob centric.
So the thing that should be mentioned, this is directed by Markus Nispel, who is a German film director who got to start doing music videos for many, many years and has directed a few movies that have struggled. But it is a Platinum Dunes production, meaning Michael Bay produced it, so hence every 5 to 10 minutes you have to get a gratuitous shot of very fake breasts.
Yeah.
Very rigidly in place boobs.
And just talking about them.
Yeah.
Everybody talks and says things, and it's the women are just there to be sexualized and to be
There's a lot of that.
Rescued, damsel in distress. They're really not there to, like the 1980 version. They're all equals.
The two
they
minority
are all equals.
characters.
The men and women are like the Alice is up there.
Oh, absolutely.
Fixing the gutters.
Yeah.
Nobody's like, oh, I can just do the dusting.
No, there's none of that.
It's all like.
It's weird that this movie is more.
Took us backwards.
Is more sexually weird and gender divided than the 1980 version.
It's because the two frat boys who decided to like rewrite this were like, yeah, we want to see TNA and blood and guts.
That's exactly what it was. So the thing is, the other thing I want to mention is that the two minority characters are basically like jesters in this movie. They are, I'll give it up to them.
Aaron Yu and Travis Van Winkle.
They are two of my favorite parts of the movie because they are well played and funny, but their characters seem to only exist to
Travis Van Winkle
be
was
funny.
Trent, who is disgusting,
and then get killed.
Yeah.
So the other characters are just to a T, except for Jared Padalecki's character, are awful. They are either reprehensible and you don't care about them, or they make decisions that are so inexplicable. You're like, well, what am I supposed to do with you?
Well, let's back up a little bit. So this, obviously was a reimagining, and it picks up, which is where it doesn't fall into the remake category. It picks up from the scene of a girl chopping the head off of Pamela Voorhees with young Jason watching in the shadows. That is
the chief difference here is after Pamela Voorhees gets her head decaffeinated, a young Jason, he's not in the lake. He's not drowned, or he is, we are told, deformed and different, but he comes out of the woods having witnessed the whole thing and takes the machete that was used to kill Mommy, and also takes Mommy's head.
They also, could have just had an actress with short hair. I mean, it was really, if they're going to show that scene and make it seem like it came from the first film, just do a little better. But
now this leads into the opening kind of fake out of the movie, where you're introduced to a group of campers and you kind of think, okay, this is the group we're going to follow, but psych, this is the group that gets massacred in the beginning of the movie, and then you follow someone else. Now, I want to shout this part out because, okay, yes, these characters are super annoying. They're hypersexualized goofballs, and they are caricatures. But Derek Mears as Jason is next level. This is my favorite portrayal of Jason. All respect to Kane Hodder, who is beloved for a reason, but Kane Hodder played a very Terminator-like Jason. Now, the big difference here is, for the first time ever, Jason runs.
Yeah.
Jason's fast in this movie.
He's not just runs, but he's
quick.
Yeah, he's got a lot of dexterity.
The thing, when Jason kills in the other movies, it's slowly, and it's because...
And he just doesn't use that blade.
It's
he uses
because
a lot of things.
He's also like... he's the Juggernaut. He's unstoppable. If he gets his hands on you, you're done, because he can snap you in half with one hand. This Jason is a big guy. Derek Mears is a big guy, but he's played decidedly as a human being most of the movie. So it's...
Well, here's what I wanted to talk about.
I think Derek Mears really deserves a lot of credit. He should be put up there in the same... vein as Doug Jones and Andy Serkis in terms of his physical acting. He also played Swamp Thing on the tragically short DC Universe version of Swamp Thing that James Wan produced.
Let me give a little plot summary.
Let's do it.
Clay Miller's sister goes missing, and he sets out to find her at her last known location near Camp Crystal Lake.
And that is Jared Padalecki.
While there, he bumps into another group of friends that are all soon targeted by Jason Voorhees. And one of the things I wanted to mention is, we get that mini Friday the 13th.
Yes.
At the beginning. And that's, while I do find it entertaining, and this film is definitely more visually appealing.
Yes.
I feel like that went on a little too long because
it did.
We really just needed to know Whitney, and we focused too much on the other characters.
It did,
in my opinion.
There was a lot.
That's Jared Padalecki's sister.
There was a lot, but the brutality.
Yeah, I get that.
Of Jason,
really good kill scenes,
unbelievable,
very violent.
The violence and gore are back, but they're not the same sort of like cartoonish level that they were in Jason X or Freddy versus Jason. It's much more brutal. It's much more visceral.
And it sets up an idea that Jason is protecting his isolation.
It really
does. He doesn't want you on his property.
It very strongly says in early on in the film, you are the trespassers here.
Yeah, leave me alone.
If you didn't come here...
I have animal traps.
Yeah, you wouldn't get killed.
Don't come here. I'm not coming to get you. You don't come to get me.
There's very much the sense that people... Because even when Whitney and her boyfriend are first going through his home, they are not respectful of it. I mean, this is clearly a place where someone lives, and they're stealing things. They're going through his stuff.
She steals that locket, and honestly,
it does end up saving her life.
Yeah, that's like drown the cat. Is that what it's called?
Save the cat.
Save the cat.
Yeah.
Because it ultimately, it does save her.
Well, that's another thing this movie does is
But then stupidly, just like that old bitch in Titanic, she throws that locket into the water, and I think that it had the power to bring Jason back in the final scene.
We'll get to that fucking final scene.
Oh my God, so bad.
But I want to say the one important thing this movie does is it mashes elements of the first three original Friday the 13th together. So you have the quick opening with Pamela. So that's Friday the 13th, part 1. For the first part of the movie, he is a grown man wearing a burlap sack with one eye hole. That's from Friday the 13th, part 2 and part of 3.
And those kills, bear trap, hangs a woman over a fire in a sleeping bag.
They are among the series' best ever.
That floorboard.
Stabbing through the
floorboards of the cabin.
And then being pulled under like a xenomorph.
Yep. When that girl was swimming under the...
Yeah.
And we don't see him until like 15 minutes or so in the movie.
It's some of the best. They are some of the best kills of the entire series.
Very angry and scary kills.
Jason is terrifying in this movie.
It's definitely the scarier of the
two.
two.
I agree. So he finds the hockey mask also, which he didn't do until the third movie.
Yeah, we'll get to that because I want to talk about that. But I want to talk about Friday the 13th and Jason. I do think they push this narrative a little bit too hard. Is when they're the first sequence of campers. they're telling the story of Jason around the campfire, because ultimately this is a campfire story.
Yeah.
Which I really did like that, but I feel like it was a little like, hey, dummies in the audience.
Oh, yeah. Well, like everything in this movie, it bashed you over the head. I mean, this is a movie that, I mean, I counted at least 7 to 9 boobs in it. It is, listen, it's a weirdly,
including Trent.
It's a weird that you're watching
he was
these
the biggest boob of all.
I know. You're watching these scenes, these shots, and you're like, I guess, but like, why? What does this serve? It's very...
I didn't even care enough about Whitney. So Whitney gets kidnapped and gets locked in Jason's underground
that's
lair.
the other thing is her whole acting like Jason's mom, and that's from the second movie.
Yeah.
That's how, the final girl from the second survived. She puts on the wig and pretends to be Jason's mom.
But I didn't even care enough about Whitney.
No,
from
you didn't
the
get to know her.
Scene. Yeah, because they had so many other characters.
The only characterization she gets
from
is
Superstore.
her mom is dying.
Felt like he was more of a characterization.
Oh, that dude, he's also from As Above, So Below, which is an underrated movie in my opinion. Really, really good found footage horror movie.
But yeah, we don't care about really any of the characters, and almost to the contrary, I really despise some of the characters.
Oh God, they're terrible.
You know, Jared Padalecki is like is supposed to be the hero of the whole film, and he is empathetic, but he's pretty boring.
I don't want to say anything negative about Mr. Padalecki, but I think
this was one of his first forays into acting.
I
think it's okay. He's improved quite a bit.
He has, but no one is accusing him of being like the world's greatest actor.
He's hot.
This is a CW movie.
It's got
Danielle Panabaker in it.
And he comes in and saves the day.
Yeah, it's got Jared Padalecki and Danielle Panabaker, who between them have like 50 seasons on the CW. So like, it's that level of acting. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But the characterization is terrible. You just don't give a shit about anybody. And it does drag on a bit too long. But
it drags also in the middle.
I do want to say the tragedy of this, though, is we didn't get more Derek Mears as Jason.
Yeah, I know. Well, his Jason portrayal, not just... and I think that them finding his living space, first of all, with all of the childhood memories and him holding on to the locket that his mother and he were pictured in, really humanized him. I mean, it was definitely a human, leave me alone. You've done nothing but ruin my life.
Without showing his face, without any dialogue or noise, Derek Mears' physicality alone demonstrated actual pathos for the first time ever. You felt like there was something to Jason, that he wasn't just some sort of supernatural murder machine, that he was a deeply damaged weirdo psycho.
Well, every time Whitney would say Jason, and he would like
snap to attention.
And he would kind of calm down.
Yeah, you could tell he was triggered and traumatized. And it was really, at the risk of sounding effusive, I know just Derek Mears, cast him. He's so good. He's so good.
Let's talk about the hockey mask.
Do it. But this version is one of my favorites.
Wow, it's not, because I watched the deleted scene of another version, and it should have been the scene.
Ooh, I didn't know about that.
So for those of you who might not know, the hockey mask wasn't an original piece on Jason's face until
Jason 3D
later in this movie, and Jason 3D. That has an iteration of how he came to get the hockey mask, right?
Yeah, he got it from after he kills Shelly the prankster. He takes it off of him, and
so in this 2009 version,
I guess burlap over your face is itchy.
It's like this guy is a like antique or like found garbage guy.
Who knows?
I don't know what his role was.
Weed growing.
Well,
redneck?
He wasn't growing the weed. He found the weed.
Okay, who is growing that weed? There are fields and
they
fields.
Said it.
Jason?
No, they said it at the beginning. somebody came and threw a bunch of seeds in this area and marked it, and then it became like legend, and somebody's friend told somebody that this is where you can find it. Approximately.
I missed that. I thought Jason was legit growing fields of weed.
So that he wouldn't murder.
To God.
No.
That's why he got so pissed off when people came on his
like,
property.
Sort of redneck weird guy finds it.
Whose only job seems to be
disgusting,
sitting in a dirty barn,
smoking
operating
weed
a
and
wood
jerking
chipper,
off.
and jerking off and operating a wood chipper, which are two things you shouldn't do together.
But the upstairs of this barn area has like all these old.
There's a lot of jerking off in this movie.
There's also a lot of Christmas themed stuff, which I don't quite understand because it's happening in the summer.
And I guess he has sex with a mannequin.
What's that kid that was in Veronica Mars and?
Oh, I don't know.
The blonde that got the gas.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah,
the one who got the arrow through the head.
I forget his first
He's
name.
been in like lots of stuff.
Yeah, he's been he had a fuck Christmas shirt. When they were upstairs, there's like a Santa Claus. So I think it was sort of, this is like a junk or antiques or like old garbage in this guy's attic. So when he goes up there after he hears Jason in the barn, this like redneck stoner dude, he goes up there and Jason gets him. Jason kills him and then just leans over, picks up a hockey mask that looks really old and puts it on his face and looks in the mirror and is like, yeah, dude.
That's the thing. Okay, so the hockey mask does look really cool, but
it does look really cool.
What is it? Why is it there? Why is it that color? It's like pretty convenient. And here's another just quick aside. I goddamn cannot stand when weed smokers are presented on camera as being like absolute pieces of shit like this guy was. This guy was like a misogynistic, rapist, weirdo creep. And it was all like, all he talked about was smoking weed and smoking. And it's like,
and
okay.
And TNA.
Like, I get it.
Yeah,
Enough.
there were a couple of like, I'm going to jerk off.
Yeah,
right
you know
now
who smokes
scenes.
weed now? Your fucking grandma who's going through chemo. So like, screenwriters, please.
So back to the deleted scene that should have been kept, in my opinion.
Love it.
So it's same dude, same stoner dude. And, you know, like I said, he lives with all this like garbage and junk.
As you do.
He puts the hockey mask on his own face and gets high inside of it.
Oh.
Smokes a joint
Yeah,
and lets the smoke swirl around it.
That makes sense.
And then when Jason comes in, he chops his head off, holds his head up, takes the hockey mask off the severed head and puts it on his own
That's
head.
way better.
I know.
That is way better.
I know.
What?
Probably too violent, too many.
Too violent? Jesus.
Maybe they were like, you can have
man.
20 occasions of violence.
I guess.
Or else we need
I feel like you could have you could have lost a couple boob shots and then maybe had this awesome kill scene in it, but whatever.
I know. So I would have preferred the cut scene.
This movie is it's an exercise in frustration because there's so much about it that is really, really good.
Yes, but it's distracted by the misogyny, the TNA, the constant like dirty sex needs. Like,
it's so
why?
Like, even actual horny teenagers
don't act
that way. Yeah, this is horny teenagers as written by middle-aged men.
Yeah, that want to see these actresses.
Yes,
boobs.
And oh god,
it's so obvious.
There was so much silicone in this movie.
It's so really obvious to me.
It's really bad. Yeah, it takes you right out of the
moment.
It does.
It takes you out of it every time. And like Jared Padalecki and this character, do you remember her name?
First off, just quick aside. Did Jared Padalecki ever take his shirt off in this movie? Because I don't think so.
No.
And that dude is like 7 foot of muscle.
And he didn't need to because his shirt fit real well.
All I'm saying is if you're going to throw like 18 boob shots in the movie, why not do a solid for the rest of the audience and have Captain Muscles take his fucking tank top off?
But even, it's not necessary.
I'm just saying.
So Clay is...
That's the Bechdel test, I believe it's called.
Jared Padalecki's...
I might have that wrong.
Character's name, and
Clay.
I'm trying to find the girl.
Danielle Panabaker?
No, that was Whitney. Jenna.
No, that wasn't Whitney. That was Jenna. Danielle Panabaker was Jenna.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's from The Flash.
Right. Jenna Correct. Jenna and Clay, they obviously have some kind of connection.
For sure.
She's like feeling his sadness and wants to help him, which I do appreciate because it swaps the gender roles just this one time where she's like, I want to help him.
Yeah.
Even though she's already dating Trent, who then hooks up with some other chick, which again, not necessary. This is all not necessary. And while they're hooking up and they're out, the other character is like, oh, I'm going to take this time to jerk off in a house full of windows.
Yeah, it's
just an odd choice. Anyway, I thought that I would have liked to see the Clay and Jenna piece to be expanded a little bit more because that was more interesting.
Are you talking characterization? You would have liked to have seen minimal characterization?
I said expanded.
Yes, that would be
and
great.
Whitney, I mean,
that would have been great.
If we're to believe that Clay has been spending the last 6 months going to this town trying to get Whitney, you would think that we would know and care a little bit more about her. That's
the
all
deepest characterization in this movie is done by the guy who has no dialogue and wears a mask.
One of the other cut scenes is that because Clay has pretty much exhausted the patience of the cops in this town because he keeps trying to figure out what happened to his sister. When he gets to the house with Jenna and says, call the police on the landline, and he does, and he says they're on their way, there is a scene where the police get that call, and they're like, what are we going to do about this guy?
Yeah.
He's worn our patience thin.
Exactly. So this also, we have to talk about the ending.
Well, I do, before we get to the ending, I do want to talk about one of the best parts of the whole film, in my opinion.
Let's do it.
Is when Clay and Jenna finally find Whitney and they have to try to get out of that tunneling system.
Oh, and Jason is coming for them? Yeah.
That is one of the best parts. It's scary. It's intense. You don't know who's going to survive. You don't know who survived. And the way that Jason gets sort of pinned down at the end, well, at the penultimate part of the end, is really great. It's really satisfying. Really exciting.
My favorite part is definitely in the first group, how they're dispatched. Just the absolute brutality of it. Jason's speed, his skill. I mean, the fact that it's a totally different vibe. There's it's less of an It Follows vibe of relentlessness. How Jason is essentially just going to wear you down, and more of, I don't know, he's like a wild animal.
But the interesting part is we don't know that he kidnaps Whitney until about halfway through the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
So even though Clay's looking for her and he goes to some neighbors and they're like, she's dead.
Now I'm going to throw this back at you because I hated the ending so much.
Oh my God, the ending was so bad.
Now,
it was laughable.
First off, this wood chipper is introduced early on in the movie, and you're thinking, okay, I'm watching a Friday the 13th, and they just had a lengthy scene with a running wood chipper in it. So
Chekhov's gun.
That's coming into play. And then the final fight scene between Jason and Jared Padalecki centers around this wood chipper.
And Whitney.
And Whitney.
She helps.
She does. No one goes in the wood chipper. Jason gets strangled by having a chain wrapped around his neck and having the chain fed into the wood chipper, which drags him.
Another cut scene. What happens is his neck snaps in the wood chipper. It pulls him all the way in and snaps his neck, and you hear it. Cut.
Why? Why did they cut that? Because all this does is pull him right up to the blades, and then for some reason stops. And you're like, huh?
Yeah.
I mean,
and they obviously wait. They wait for him to not be moving until
sunrise. Here's the next thing.
They've waited. They've carried his body to the dock.
Instead of chopping him up into little pieces or burning him.
Or leaving.
Or just getting the fuck out of there.
Yeah, leaving. Bye.
They take his body to the lake and roll it in the water. I don't know why they do that, but they do. Now,
they wait until dawn.
The other thing. This whole movie, the greatest strength of this movie is that Jason has been characterized as firmly human. And then they kill him And in the literal last 2 seconds of the movie,
She throws the pendant into the water.
He jumps out of the goddamn lake.
They throw the mask into the water. What?
Why?
You kidding me?
They throw the mask in the water with him. Like, in case you need this later, buddy. And he comes out of the lake like 2 seconds later wearing the mask and grabs her. I get that it's a throwback to the first movie, but you just spent 90 minutes making Jason the most human he's ever been. And in the last instant of the movie,
you ruined all of it.
You
basically ruined the entire movie.
All of the work done.
And it cuts to black.
So frustrating.
So we don't even have any
idea.
they
wanted to launch into that. They wanted to just follow it up with another sequel.
They did? There was planning to do more?
Well,
Do tell.
Beloved co-host, there was.
Well, it fades to black, and we don't know if anybody was killed or not, or if it was a dream. It doesn't matter. Basically, that scene was so ruinous.
Now, you might be wondering why we haven't gotten a new entry since 2009 in any form. And this is because since then, Sean S. Cunningham, the director of the original, and Victor Miller, the screenwriter of the original, have been in a very, very nasty legal battle. Now, to boil it down...
I just thought of a perfect ending.
Victor Miller, after 35 years, was getting supposed to get the copyright to Jason back. Sean Cunningham argued that because Victor Miller was on a work-for-hire contract, that he did not have the rights to the character. So that went to court. The court sided sort of with Miller, but not really. Basically, the rights have now been freed up. We're getting a new version. We're getting a show on Peacock called Crystal Lake, which is going to be
a prequel.
Yep. But because of some fancy legal work, Brian Fuller, the showrunner and producer of the 2009 remake, but we love Brian Fuller here. He is now allowed to use Jason and all elements from later installments, so he can basically do whatever he wants.
Excellent.
So we are going to be getting some new stuff. It is made by Brian Fuller, who is one of our favorites here, Pushing Daisies, Hannibal, the first season of Heroes, which is the only good one.
So it's going to be violent.
It's going to be
but
really...
it's going to be well
and
written.
It's hopefully going to explore Pamela, because she is such a fascinating character that really didn't get explored enough.
Yeah, so the prequel is essentially, Jason as a kid being neglected by these horny teen
with, I'm guessing,
camp
maybe
counselors.
some flash forwards to an adult Jason, because now they have access to the hockey mask and the machete and all of the iconography. So, there was a very popular asymmetrical multiplayer game based on Friday the 13th that had to shut production because of these legal battles. Mm-hmm. Nobody was allowed to do any Jason content until the copyright issue was resolved, but it has been resolved, and it seems like in a way that made everybody and nobody happy. But I'm just psyched we're getting more Jason stuff.
So I think we agree that the 1981 is our preferred
far
version.
Superior. And listener, I know that I said in these remake segments I didn't want to do ones where the remake wasn't any good, and I'll be honest, I just remember liking it more.
Yeah. Well,
it was on
you were probably
rewatching
a little hornier for boobs then.
I'd like to think that hasn't changed.
Now you got them all the time.
I'd like to think that hasn't changed.
Here's before we end, I would like to give my last 2 minutes of the 1990 version as it should have been filmed.
The 2009 version?
Yes, the 2009 version.
Okay.
What did I say?
1990.
Oh, yeah. No, the 2009 version.
All right.
So after they get Jason into the wood chipper and it stops and he's clearly incapacitated, Clay and Whitney escape in some vehicle. The cop car is there. I don't know if he found the keys to his dirt bike or motorcycle or whatever. Doesn't matter. They take it. Right. They rip the mask off of him before they leave. And as they're driving away, the sun starts to come up and they throw the mask. Somehow something happens. It's either in the bag or Whitney sees it on the floor or on the seat, and she throws it out the window, and they drive away. And then we see, just from point of view of somebody seeing the mask in the grass and picking it up, and then you pan to Jason putting it back on his face.
Nice. I mean, anything is better than what they did. It was... I don't know. You ever? It kind of felt like it came time to write that scene, it was like quitting time, and everyone was like, "Oh God, I just want to go home."
Let's pay homage to the first one, except terribly and nonsensical.
It did not work.
Yeah.
And I am sorry again to be negative because, well, let me end on a positive. There is a lot about the remake that works. It's unfortunate that it was unable to be explored.
It had so much potential.
Derek Mears, I contend, is the best version of Jason.
I thought it was
the
great,
scariest
except
version.
for most of it.
It's a curiosity. I think it's worth a watch just to watch Derek Mears' version of Jason, but go into it with eyes open that you're going to be watching a
lot of gratuitous
lackluster
sexuality
movie.
And
it's not a great movie.
Sexploitation. I mean, it is an exploitation,
and it's very
slashers
reminiscent.
Typically are exploitation, so it really does lean into that.
This was around in the late 2000s. It was around the time where the whole like extreme edgelord kind of vibe was starting to die down. And you can really see it in this movie. It's like, it's very dated.
Is this like where the like American Pie movies started to come out?
No, that was that was like 1999. But yeah, there was like a 10-year period or so where it was like, oh, let's take it as far as possible. And that is not a substitution for story or character. It just isn't. I'm not interested in how much gross stuff you and your buddies can put together. I want to see something with...
If you're not going to stab the girl through the chest or chop her boobs off, then there's really no point in showing so many boobs.
There were a lot of...
It just was like, why? Come on.
It was very distracting.
Get to the better part of the movie.
And there's something...
Some people, don't like the mixture of sexuality and brutality.
That it's...
Rightfully so. I don't think
What are you doing? Are you building tension and terror, or are you trying to like titillate the audience?
Yeah. Are you taking us out of it? Because you did that successfully.
It doesn't work.
Way to go.
It doesn't work. But
1980 for life.
All right. That wraps up Remake. And folks, we will try to keep that disparity from happening again. But I don't know. Maybe it's not so bad to be honest about an entry.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is, you guys.
It's a mixed bag, the 2009 version. It's got some stuff going for it, but ultimately, in my opinion, too many things working against it.
We do have some other ideas like The Fly and some Dawn of the Dead type things.
Oh, yeah. Or let us know if you have any ideas out there as well.
Absolutely. What would you like us to remake?
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Terror in Tandem is written, produced, and recorded by Laura and Richard Mathiasen, and edited and mixed by Richard Mathiasen. Our theme was written and performed by Carrie Denver, and all other music was written and performed by David Hispanic. All opinions expressed on this podcast are our own and should be taken as such. Thanks for listening, and please remember to give us a like, a review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. We're